everyone. How's it going? Welcome to the Community Conversations. My name is Liz, and I'm here from the growth team at Dfinity. So Community Conversations is a series where we discuss technical developments that are happening within the internet computer ecosystem, well, with the community itself. So today we have our very own Rick Porter from Discover. Please give a warm welcome to Rick. So great to have you on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here, and thanks for putting this together. I look forward to this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Rick, why don't you tell us about your background as a developer and your interest with the open web? And how did you become interested in the internet computer anyway?
Yeah, so I can't even remember when I started becoming a developer, but I've been programming since I was super young, trying to get better at video games through cheating. And I spent most of my college years working on an MMORPG and trying to figure out how to build my own client, write my own servers, and create my own bots to play along with me so I could get better and I could obviously win. But you learn a lot doing that. You learn a lot digging into the core of an application, and that involved like actually using Hydra back in the day, which was a decompiler, and kind of understanding how they actually constructed the game and how they actually made the game and how those protocols actually worked that communicate with the servers. So working with protocols and working with low-level systems and decompiling and understanding deeply how something works is kind of how I got my roots as a software engineer. And that's how I became a better software engineer, by reading other people's code and understanding how they did things. And so over time, I've always had a deep interest in how these types of systems work. And I see a lot of parallels between what's happening on the internet computer in those days. But to go back 4 years ago or 3 years ago, I was at Boston Consulting Group, which we were working with a company called De Beers, and it was, how do you trace diamonds from the time they leave the mine in Botswana to the time they hit the retailers in London? And the whole goal was De Beers wanted to do this on a blockchain. They wanted to do this in a decentralized way. And so we were working closely with the Ethereum blockchain and working at the time with Dominic and Dfinity very early on to kind of understand how this approach might be. And obviously, we're using interesting technology like Intel SGX, which are these secure compute enclaves, and using them as a way to process information and data completely securely and within inside of this enclave. So it was, you couldn't reveal all the data to all the actors within inside of the network, which was super important in supply chain. Not everyone needed to know what every single actor was doing, just that the actor was doing something. And as this progressed, we quickly learned that although Ethereum was great technology at the time and it fit a lot of the needs that we were looking for, we couldn't achieve the decentralizedness and the scalability that we were looking for. And there was a lot of techniques. I mean, we could talk about those, but like high level, you end up with a lot of centralized components that are reading decentralized information. And a lot of the actors were, at the end of the day, interacting solely with decentralized components that at the end would interact with the decentralized components. And at the time, that solution was acceptable. But in the back of all of our minds, there's got to have been a way to do this completely decentralized and still fit the needs of these large-scale enterprise applications, so that you could achieve complete decentralized while still working with high volume, high IO transactions. And as time progressed, as Dfinity became more mature, we started experimenting it with more and more. And I think I started working on like a canister development kit in assembly script. At first it started with Go, and then I was thinking, man, maybe engineers will want to use something more akin to TypeScript or JavaScript, which I started using WebAssembly. And that actually got me very far. We were able to do quite a bit of different interactions with WebAssembly and actually get canister deployed to the Dfinity network and actually write and read transactions from it. But what was revealed with inside of this was that you could actually build a social network. You could build social tools that are completely decentralized. And it just had to been something, it just had to be focusing on the data model. And with the orthogonal persistence, this made it incredibly easy because we had the ability to build these complex data models and these graphs within inside of the canisters themselves, and actually create the original alpha, the POC, which was sometime back in March. And it became a very interesting situation. Now you can do large scale applications and possibly enterprise applications in a completely decentralized way. And so this is kind of where those roots, how do you design a protocol? That's something that's been deeply in my background. And how do you start actually working with servers and building out these types of architectures? So it was, to me, a perfect match to what I was doing before and what I want and where I wanted to be going.
Cool. Thank you so much for that, Rick. And, speaking of decentralization, Discover, which you have created, is a decentralized open social media platform akin to an open Reddit with already 20,000 users. So I just want to take a moment and really commend you for that. I just saw a tweet that a Dfinity team member had shared from a Y Combinator application that was basically bragging about having like 40 daily active users. So you guys are just blowing them out of the water. Super, super cool to see. So talk us through your vision for Discover. What is the pain point you're trying to solve? Who is your target audience?
Yeah, our target audience is anyone who wants to own their own social footprint, right? If you want to retain ownership of the identity that you've created online and identities, we're multiple people online. You have your Discord, you have your Steam, you've got your Facebook, you've got your Google, you've got your in your Twitter account, and not necessarily all those identities are really the same person, but we really want to create a situation where you can retain that ownership of your own identity and of the footprint, of that social footprint that you're starting to put together. And I think that's the final long-term vision. So Discover is really, at its current state, I see it as like step one. We always talk about the iceberg, right? And if that is the iceberg, right? If owning your own identity and social footprint is the iceberg, I feel like we're right now in a boat that knows where that can see the iceberg, and we still have to paddle over to it and get on top of it so we can get to that tip and work our way down. But I feel like we're in the very early stages of starting to understand, how does DeSo work, and how do you build a DeSo platform that is not only authentic and provides all the transparency you need, but also gives you that web speed that everyone is used to and already looking for when they're interacting with the social platform.
Definitely. And, speaking of DeSo, or decentralized social, for the internet computer, DeSo is one of the main verticals that has emerged. So we see Discover, we see District, of course, and so on and so forth, which is really impressive to see because the internet computer has really only been around for less than 4 months, live, I mean, and Discover's success already outpaces anything you might see in the blockchain space. So what do you think is unique or special about Discover's approach that has made it outpace other DeSo use cases in the blockchain space?
Yeah, it's really about community. I've said this before and it sounds cheesy, but the reality is when we put things up, like looking back into the original days of the alpha, it was so ugly. It was just weird. It was a weird site. The interactions were odd. At the time, it was just me. It was design, development, product, everything was just me. So it was just kind of like walking in the dark in every single direction that I could think of. But through putting up the original site and creating a way that you could post and comment, you started getting all this feedback from the users. Hey, wouldn't it be cool if I could do this? Wouldn't it be cool if I could do that? And a lot of these feature requests and bugs that came through at the original days have without a doubt made the footprint of the site that it is today. And a lot of those users who came to the site in those original days, it's great to still see them post, to still see them interact with the site. We have this one user, I think his username is user test, And without a doubt, it was like he came to the site and was like, oh, okay, what is this? What's your username? Well, I'm just testing. So my username is user test, right? And it's cool that the users still kept this, but that kind of signal of seeing those users stick around and continue to evolve with the platform has been like really, really interesting. And there's all these other like aspects of how the site has slowly grown over time. The kind of ethos is, let's not integrate centralized components into the site. If at the core of the site, it needs to be decentralized. So we don't really get a lot of the centralized bells and whistles that you're used to. Like, let's verify that their email is real verify the user is real by sending them an email and having click that email in their inbox. And rely on centralized providers like Facebook to work on discovering bots or spam users and things like that. But that, at the end of the day, if I feel like I have to verify my Facebook, I'm really bound to the identity of my Facebook at the end of the day. And I feel like that at that point, we have no longer created a decentralized platform. We just created a decentralized platform that's bound to a centralized personhood or identity. And so, originally we used to have email sign up right in the alpha. And I think a lot of people remember that. And it was like username, password. And we never sent them an email, but we were collecting that information. And a lot of the feedback at the time was, aren't we just hooked up to another centralized provider to identify myself? And it took us it was hard to dump that, but as soon as we got rid of that and just went straight internet identity, and I remember the process of, you should use internet identity, and us implementing only internet identity was like 24 hours, right? It was from the time that we had the conversation to the time it was implemented. So that speaks to that ease of use of the internet identity at the time. And obviously the amount of people who have integrated it with use it, still that ease of use exists and it continuously improves. But that's kind of the ethos moving forward, is how do we start decentralized as far as we can and figure out, do we have to budge left towards the centralized world at all? And as long as you look at it as that spectrum from centralized to decentralized. And I felt like when I originally thought of designing applications, especially decentralized application, and maybe I was wrong in the beginning before I started working on Discover, but I was always like, so in the centralized world, we would do X, Y, and Z. And so how do we pull that over to the decentralized world? Now the thinking is, okay, the decentralized world, this is how things are done. So how do we just implement it in a completely decentralized way? And that thinking is always continuing to be challenged, because there's differences obviously between centralized and decentralized. And it's not like, oh, it's just harder to do. It's just, you have to think differently. You have to approach the problem from this new angle and accept that this is the angle that you're approaching it from. And then you have to take it from the angle of, we need to make it easy for the users to actually use this. It can't be this complex, all these levers and buttons and things that you have to actually do to get signed up and start creating the post. I wanted to make it so from the time you landed to the site, you within 30 seconds could be creating a post or comment. And as Discover is growing, we're having more interaction and more users. And that's a double-edged sword, right? Ease of access, especially on a social platform, has become an interesting equation. But without a doubt, I have a feeling we're going to continue to solve this. And how do we establish and verify the authenticity of the identity that user has created, and continue to establish that identity and continue to verify their presence? And there's this whole subject that I wanted to talk about, which is, originally in decentralized, I think many years ago, 3-4 years ago, which seems like many years. In the decentralized world, that's a lifetime, right? But there's this idea of like, we're on a trip to Mars, and there's 1,000 of us, and we need to establish a colony. But by the time we land, everyone's identity is wiped. Who knows? Everything just disappears, and we need to reestablish everybody's identity. And I think, although that still exists to this day, but it's just not as true anymore, right? We have, for the past couple of years, have created our decentralized identities and established our decentralized digital footprints. And there's a lot of information there that is still valid that we can look to for helping verify users in a completely decentralized way. And I think modern DSO platforms like Discover are going to continue to evolve to help understand how do we establish that personhood and how do we verify and how do we make sure that as the platform grows, it continuously evolves on how this thinking is. And I think, and I actually don't think I know evolution of what Discover was 3 to 4 months ago or even 6 months ago is going to drastically improve and drastically evolve over the next 6 months to year. And I see already quite a bit of improvements from establishing our personhood and establishing verified and identified users. And there's so many examples of this, but more recently, we did this airdrop, and within these concepts, we're able to find a soup of users, the sauce of users, and identify them as positive users of the platform. And I think as we evolve through this process of understanding how DSO works and how do we start establishing these identities, I think this process will continually get more and more interesting as we figure out different ways of doing this. And there's a lot of mechanics that could possibly be implemented to solve this. But I think the important one is it stupid simple to use, right? Is it something that we can understand, and is it something that does not require someone to start copying and pasting all these identities? It's got to be simple. It's got to be simple as a click, and it's got to leverage more like these modern web speed components to actually be able to do this.
I completely agree with you. So I have a lot of people who are not part of any blockchain community come up to me and ask me, they're like, well, why would I use a game? Why would I play a game built on a blockchain platform? Why would I use a social media application built on a blockchain platform? And my answer to them is always, you shouldn't necessarily use an application. And my theory is that I don't think consumers necessarily care most of the time, like what tech stack what tech stack the application that they're using is built upon. They just need to extract the most amount of utility, whatever that might need for them when they're using an application. But back to this discussion of decentralized versus centralized on the social media spectrum, I do have to say that for me, as a user of Discover, one of the things that was most striking was that in the very early days, I had a lot of ideas for feature requests, and I popped them into the portal. And I was always very pleasantly surprised at the speed in which my requests were enacted. And I was always thinking like, hey, I am a mega user of Reddit, but there's no way that anything like that would ever happen on a centralized social media platform, right? So for you talk about Discover being a user control platform in terms of features, in terms of roadmap, but also in terms of data. Can you speak to the mechanism by which this occurs?
Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts around governance on the platform, right? And to get to a truly user-controlled platform, we need to open up governance more. But I think it's a gradual process. We've already identified components on the platform that need to be user controlled. And one of them is, how do rewards work on the platform? How does moderation actually work on the platform? And we have basic moderation tools right now. So portal owners can pretty much moderate their own portals. And if they don't agree with the content that's in there, they can remove it from the portals, which goes into an all bucket. So the content still remains. It just exists inside of a different part of the platform. But another aspect of this is, how do you control the rewards, right? And how will we grow mechanisms to allow users to control those rewards? It's like the social tokens on the platform. And we're going to start introducing a mechanic that'll allow users to introduce their own algorithms and their own mixes of how these rewards should be distributed. And I think that'll be an interesting time for when we start taking certain aspects of the platform and saying, hey, it's up to the users to decide how these work. We're trying the best we can to go through the feature requests and bugs and see how we can implement these features and bring them up to the community. And there's actually a memory that I have right now, which when we originally rolled out the ability for people to moderate these portals, I think you could actually, I don't think you actually removed it. You deleted it at the very beginning. And I remember releasing it. I remember making the announcement. And within like 30 minutes, there was a thread that had like 30 or 40 comments right away saying how the feature was incorrectly implemented and the users were not super satisfied with it. But what came out of that was the discussion. And what came out of that was an answer that allowed transparency. And I think that'll continue as we continue to work through these problems and continue to work with the community on how do we actually implement the correct way of providing the level of transparency that a user might not get out of a centralized platform, but the level of transparency they demand out of a decentralized platform and future social platforms. I think we'll continue to work with the users on that and help us understand how does that process actually look like? And how do we make that process so simple, right? How do we make it just like you're on the platform and you're interacting with it? And I think we have a couple concepts that we're going to start testing with the users to see how do we actually do true governance in a DSO way without making it cumbersome or overwhelming them with the amount of decisions they have to make. So it's really about packaging that up.
Definitely. And going back to something you were talking about earlier, you recently did an airdrop with Entropot for stars of the Starburst through Discover. And I thought that was such a cool thing. It was like, I mean, I didn't expect it at all. So just like logging into the interface and seeing that there was some surprise waiting for me and the ease of transferring it out to a different wallet was just an absolute pleasure. So talk us through how this airdrop came about and also talk us through whether or not ownership of these stars will confer some kind of membership benefit, either with Discover or with a different universe going forward.
Yeah, that's a good question. And so like there's the technical conversation, right? I think it was Steven reached out to me. He's the Tonic Labs. He's the one who's created the Tonic Labs. He's created Entropo. He's created Rise of Magi. And so he reached out to me saying, hey, would it be cool if we did an airdrop to Discover users? And this is completely over Telegram. So to this day, we still have not talked over the phone. And I was like, cool. All right, let's figure it out. And I'll figure out who our top, 5,000 users are, and we can drop to their principals. And the whole thing, the whole integration, and this is so important, the whole integration and planning and implementation happened over a one-on-one Telegram chat. So like, obviously I have an enterprise background working with integrating enterprise solutions. And I can't imagine just being like, hey, State Street, that's one of the clients back in the day that we did an integration with. So telegramming, their CTO and just being like, cool, do you want to do this integration? Yeah, okay, let's do it. Here, I'll just copy some code into the Telegram and you can use this code and I'll use that code. And it was a very fluid process. We've both been working obviously in the IC for a little bit now, but we just kind of, once you understand the primitives of the IC, right? These technical primitives, like we need a DID, which establishes the protocol of how we'll communicate. And once we have our nomenclature laid out, which we both have, as we both been developing, the conversation was quick and fluid. We shared things extremely easily, like, hey, here's a snippet of code you can use. And I was like, hey, how do I do this? He's like, here's a snippet of code that you can use. So there was this moment of like, we were just sharing code and sharing concepts and ideas. And the process was super quick. We were on the same page the whole time. So when it came down to actually do the airdrop and have the airdrop integrated with Discover, it was hours of work, not days of work, but hours of work to actually do these integrations. And as you guys know, I preach integrations for Discover. I want more of these integrations to happen. And a quick side tangent, we're working with Hazel to try to figure out how do we do these, how do we convert more of the platform into NFTs, but I'll go into that later. But getting back to Starburst, it was super important that we made that process so simple. As soon as you landed on the page, let's just query the Stoic, see if they own something, and just give them a pop-up. And we now have a more generic approach to do this, to support future airdrops, to create a more fluid process. But I was like pleasantly surprised how not only simple it was to integrate two canisters. And I live in, West Coast, America. I live in Portland. He lives in New Zealand, right? So how do you, like, we did a complete integration over Telegram in what, two different massive time zones, right? Maybe 12-hour different time zones. So I think that speaks to the technical ease that we've gotten out of the IC. And I think future integrations will follow a very similar process. And the learnings that we've had, the technical learnings that we had from that integration. And if you've reached out to me on Discord, I've shared that code with you. I've shared that code with a lot of people of what we've actually done and how we did that integration to try to make sure more of these integrations can happen. But I think moving forward, integrations are going to be so important. So the Starburst drop was, to me, it was an extremely interesting scenario. We had two canisters, two teams, completely diverse, working together, that were able to integrate seamlessly and provide a modern web experience by doing it. Like, I don't think our users didn't have to make any installations. They didn't have to go copy a bunch of, they had to copy their principal out of their wallet ID, but that's it. And once it was transferred over, that they were able to buy and sell it or trade it on Intrapo. And I think that was a very interesting experience. And we were able to track how many users were actually able to transfer it. And I think we had like 40 or 50% transfer rate, which is extremely interesting. And also that the liquidity that people can get out of future NFT drops kind of speaks to that. And it just, this concentration of users on Discover, that 5,000 we have, and we've grown quite a bit even since this airdrop, but we'll continue to get a higher quality concentration and a higher quality user base because of these airdrops.
Completely. And going back to what you were saying earlier about State Street being a previous client, I also worked with State Street in the course of my old job at Goldman Sachs. And it was really funny because at that point in time, Goldman is really trying to position themselves as a tech company and not a financial institution. Yet, if you talk to any of the developers who worked at Goldman, just to make like one simple change to a line of code necessitated, so many layers of approval. So it's very, very different than this process you were describing with Steve from Tonic Labs and yourself, like working async to get this airdrop up and running. And I have to say it was an amazingly successful effort. So really, really well done with all of that. So Rick, I had a quick question for you. So when it comes to Sybil attacks, how do you think about preventing these for Discover and Discover's users?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. And so there's so many different angles that we need to take. One is we need to kind of we need to add a proof of work to the sign up process. And if you Google proof of work DSO, you'll probably come up with the word CAPTCHA. And although CAPTCHA is interesting and a great intermediate solution, we've got to figure out more interesting approaches to just slowing down that sign up process, but making it still seamless, right? Just making it so that we can establish that there is a real human behind the keyboard while they're signing up. And in the future, we're going to have API users, but like right now, we want to concentrate on the user. And but going back to what I said is we want to do things completely decentralized. So if I wanted to add CAPTCHA to the website right now, I could probably find like 30 great, amazing providers that I could just drop on the platform right now and integrate, but they're going to be centralized. And we need decentralized proof of work for establishing that there's a real person behind the keyboard. And there's a lot of great papers that you can research and kind of get an understanding of how that approach works. But then there's the next part of this. So that would be great. If you're listening to this right now and you're looking for an application to develop or just having a conversation to have, there's a lot of aspects of how a CAPTCHA style system or a puzzle style system that can be built completely decentralized. And you have a user right now, and obviously me speaking, because that's going to be something that we would be interested in leveraging. And if you have questions on ideas of how I think we may do that, I would love to tell you everything that I've been thinking just to kind of boost that. But integrations are so important. But then the next step of that is kind of establishing who our core user base is through an algorithm of some sort. And there's a couple models that we're exploring that we believe will start helping us identify the users who are contributing positive content to the platform and attempting to grow the community in a positive way. So if you're just going to the platform and spamming it, the goal is to identify you and the other spammers and bucket them. And the goal is to identify the users who are positively contributing to the platform and trying to create content and trying to approve it, and also bucket them and empower them to be able to not only help grow the platform, but grow aspects of themselves and their footprint within the community, right? So there's a couple models that we're exploring, but it would be very interesting as time progresses that Sybil resistance is definitely a chief conversation that we've been having on an hourly basis, possibly. But we want to make sure that the approach that we take still allows anyone to establish their identity and grow that identity. That's so important that we don't create an algorithm that kind of creates this like crypto feudalism that you have to work your way up through the ranks. There's got to be a way that a new person who has not been part of these platforms can still establish themselves in a reasonable time and in a reasonable manner.
Cool, thanks, Rick. So the next question will be the final question from me, just because we have a ton of questions from the community and I want to make sure we get through them all. So I know that right now we have a second hackathon that's ongoing with Discover, the theme of which is the integrated game. So can you talk us through why you've decided to hone in on games as a vertical for your two hackathons that you've organized? It's interesting because DSO and games are the two, I would say, most vibrant verticals that we see on the internet computer. And then secondly, outside of planning hackathons, what big things do you see on the roadmap for Discover in the near future?
Yeah, so the first hackathon we put together was kind of like, let's just get a hackathon going. We hosted a hackathon a couple times, or in my career, I've hosted a couple of hackathons before, and always with a lot more help. But we kind of just put that concept out there, and I think I reached out to Definity, and you guys are extremely helpful in making sure we got our messaging straight and helped us think through these concepts. But gaming, to me, I have a huge passion for gaming. I'm a Dota player. I'm the worst Dota player, so never play with me. You're gonna lose like right away. But if you're playing Dota with me, my other screen's open and I'm programming, but I still love the game. So it's this idea that I feel like the IC to me presents a lot of similar mechanics as a multiplayer game server. The whole concept I've just said is not completely fleshed out, but there's so many similarities and parallels to be how those two might work. And going back to skins and NFTs and things like that, those are so naturally crypto that it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Like when you look at Fortnite and you're sitting there and playing Fortnite, right? And you've earned all these skins and you have these rare skins. Those are just NFTs. Game skins are NFTs, and those should be able to be tradable, but that's a whole nother tangent. But I think it's so important that gaming finds its roots in decentralized technology, and the fact that the IC literally can facilitate these style of games and provide the marketplaces and interactions and reasonable web speeds to actually provide an interesting and fun gaming experience. I think that's kind of where we wanted to start with gaming. And it also gaming creates a lot of technology that focuses on usability and the user and that web speed that we're looking for, right? And we've proved that, with the games that have come out through that last hackathon. I think there were 10 games that did not exist yet, but it existed on the IC, completely on the IC, that are still, some of them being played today. When you look at the games like Metaverse, what an interesting, it's like a mod, right? Where you kind of you're going into this world and you're trying to solve a puzzle, but the puzzle exists completely decentralized, right? It's not like you have this centralized approach. It exists completely decentralized, and all the users who interacted with it. And I think to this day, there's only been 2 or 3 people who have actually completed the puzzle. And what was so interesting is that the first person got one ICP. There was an ICP hidden into the game. And I really think in the future, we're going to see more style of games where there's these puzzles that people have to interact. They have to dive into this virtual world to try to solve all these different equations to extract possibly NFTs or ICP out of. But what I found interesting is that we got people to start working together too, very abstractly. The very first hackathon, we're working together. The second hackathon, I was like, let's get force integration. Let's make the point of this is we're not only doing gaming, but let's start working together and figuring out how do we start integrating together and start building applications together. And Jorgen Builder, he's a Discord user. He's starting to put together a leaderboard, like the open leaderboard. And please, if you're in Discord, hit him up, ask him some questions because he's working on a really cool project. Yeah, he's working on a super cool project that I think will be a very interesting integration point for future gaming. It's not a requirement to integrate with it, but I think it would be really cool to create your scores within your game and have this universal scoreboard. And I think there's a lot of interesting mechanics that can be done with this. But if you're already verifying your users, and going back to what Jorgen's building, it's like almost like Steam, right? Like there's so many, it's so abstract, but like you're pumping everyone's individual scores into this container, and it's so exciting because then you can have this like this container that exists that contains all the different games that people are playing. And obviously there might be some sort of opt-in and opt-in for the game, but as long as you follow this protocol that he's put together, and the protocol is pretty simple, it's super simple. You can not only integrate your Stoic wallet, but your plug wallet, and then the users who are playing the game and their potential scores. Like this starts creating a point where we can start integrating games abstractly through this individual layer. And I think another point is games need multiple integrations. We need to start figuring out how do we start communicating with different aspects of not only the IC, but possibly maybe we can start interacting with Bitcoin through these games. So maybe we can start interacting with Ethereum through these games. Because remember, even the page itself, if you host a game, if you put something on the IC and it's just a front-end application, it's not just a front-end application, it's a decentralized front-end application, right? So you've already solved step one. I have my first decentralized application. And if you like Fleek, and I think what Fleek's way of deploying your front end saved me on my game personally. I was like trying to deploy something, and I just went to Fleek, hooked up my GitHub, and then pushed it, and I automatically had my web app already sitting in a decentralized way. But you can literally just follow this methodology, right? And then now you have not only a decentralized front-end application, but you can start interacting like with the IC, or you can start interacting with Ethereum, or you can start interacting with Bitcoin. And I think this, there's so many aspects of these integrations. So I want to see these games are great. Now let's start pulling each other together. And that's, to me, going to make these really interesting and exciting experiences that people can share.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And just seconding what you said just now about Fleek, I participated in the first season of the hackathon, and it was such a cool opportunity to deploy like an open source version of Sudoku that I had found. I'm like, oh my God, this is really easy. It's just like such a pleasure to use. So Rick, we do have around 15 questions for you from the community today. So we'll see what we're able to get through. So we had started a Reddit thread to field some questions beforehand. We have 2 from there, so that's where we'll begin. So first question from Reddit user LiveInPixel. Apart from decentralization, tokenized ownership, and the more obvious things, what do you see as the future of social media?
I think, when you think of this future of DSO, and so decentralized social media, tokenized ownership is super interesting, and it's definitely an aspect of how like everything's an NFT, and I've been saying this to the team a lot, like everything on Discover needs to be an NFT in some way, right? And it needs to be shareable, and it needs to be it needs to have all the aspects that the ownership at the end of the day, that the content that I've created, which is an NFT, So I created a post, I've created a comment, I've uploaded a video, I've created an image, I've had all these different interactions on the site. Those are all NFTs. And those NFTs are owned by the user at the end of the day. We just facilitate a protocol that allows the user to interchange or to interact with their own NFTs and share their NFTs, right? So NFT is drastically going to change. And you see this with Hazel, right? NFTs are these applications. So I really think it's that tokenized ownership, but like in the aspect that everything you own in DSO needs to be mapped back to your identity or your wallet in some way. And I think then that allows the integrations, that builds in those types of integrations. And this allows the governance too, because the platform you're interacting with, that you're providing your NFTs, has different types of rules and mechanisms that you can work with. So I think it really starts at the user and then works its way up through the integrations and through the governance and through that interoperability.
Thank you for that, Rick. So second question from Reddit, from Reddit user Solaris1972. I'd like to ask, what is the general roadmap for the next 12 months? Are you guys planning more hackathons? I, for the record, love them, and the airdrop you guys did. It helps keep attention to discover and help the ecosystem. In addition, are there any details for your governance token? District has some details out, so interesting to see how yours differ. And lastly, this is a meaty question. How do you plan to improve the user experience? There isn't a downvote button currently, so a lot of spam seems to show up under all portals. Is there any way through decentralized moderation users can contribute?
Yeah, I may have to re-ask some of the questions, but let's start off with the first one is on the roadmap. We're focusing a lot on moderation, right? Moderation and verification of the users, right? And which I think will also be a good spam resistance too. But like, how do we create a lot of the traditional moderation tools with transparency and bring them to discover and start empowering portal owners more, right? There needs to be a way that portal owners not only can own and moderate their own portals, but establish other moderators. And there needs to be a way to open up moderation for the global platform also, to give a little assistance to the team on how we're actually doing this. It's so important to me that the transparency is there. Like if something is removed, we need to know, and we need to know why, and we need to know that there was something has happened, and there's got to be reasoning and thinking, and there needs to be a discussion around the community of why these things are being removed. And so to me, those types of mechanics are very important. We also have a lot of like hackathon. We want to continue to do the hackathons. We got to get into a rhythm of them. And we got to get the community used to that. Look, every 2 to 3 months, we're definitely having a hackathon. If this is going to be the subject, we're going to give you good enough lead time to be able to participate and develop something that you're passionate about. But we got to keep that cycle going. And I think that'll help people grow the community. And I think we're going to start splitting the hackathons into more tranches like we've done with the season 2, where you've got your game, and that's great. And it's going to be always the primary focus will be not maybe in a game, but all the different subject matters, but there's always got to be a tranche for open source, right? We got to make sure that we're empowering the community with knowledge, right? And giving them that motivation to be able to develop more the motivation to develop the applications through the empowerment of knowledge. And I think that's going to be super key moving forward. And obviously there's going to be a lot of NFT drops. We've got to figure out, we've got to analyze this previous NFT drop and really consider different aspects of like what went right, what went wrong. We really have to have that postmortem. And I think it'll be a very interesting conversation. And that conversation needs to happen with the community too. There was like a middle question. There was another, there's something before the downvote button.
Oh yeah, let me take a look. Oh, right. So it was, are there any details for your governance token? District has some details out. So curious to see how yours might differ.
Yeah, we're still in process of trying to understand better what the implications of governance are for DSO. 2 or 3 months ago it'd probably be, I would have seemed way more confident with answers, but what we're learning is DSO is a completely different beast than what we're seeing with other types of decentralized platforms. There's going to be governance, and there is going to be a user-controlled system. there's going to be tokens that help empower the users to make those decisions. There's going to be a fair right token, a token that is earned through participation on the platform. But there needs to be a lot of mechanics to help balance those tokens and help understand how those tokens can be abused, right? If you have a token, you think about like all the different types of vectors of attack. But when you have two tokens, how does a multi-token system, is it just twice the amount of vectors of attack, or is it 4 times the amount of vectors of attack? So there's a lot of understanding that we want to have, and we're going to understand by working with the community. We're going to understand by releasing features that give us levers and give the community transparency on the impact that the governance is having on this platform. And I think we want to make a decision. We want to push something out, but we also want to make it the right decision, and we want to push the right thing out. But I do think that District had a great approach to governance, and I do like a lot of the mechanics that they're trying to introduce. So I'm very interested to see how that grows, and I think it's great. I think what District is doing with their platform and how they're growing and how they're interacting with the users is amazing, and I'm really excited to see to continue to watch the success that District is having. And I really hope there's a lot of learnings that can help empower Discover from it. And finally, the downvote button. So this is a common feature, you know? So downvote button to me is a mechanic that bots can use it's just a lever for bots and spammers. And I don't think it's necessarily a lever that will be used by the community. Like, yes, the community will downvote things that they don't agree with, right? Completely, right? And I will downvote posts also that I don't agree with. But my fear is that's a lever for spammers and bots to mute someone, right? To prevent someone from having a voice. And even if we didn't have spammers or bots, my fear is a downvote button on an early DSO or an early social platform at all, DSO or centralized, could have the improper use or improper mechanic of quieting a voice that might need to be seen or heard, right? And like, if there's something completely terrible that someone is saying on the platform, yeah, it's going to get removed, or something's going to happen to it, right? But like, if you calling the platform trash, or you're disagreeing with the direction, that's perfectly acceptable thing to say. Like, although if you do come to the platform and say it's trash and you hate it, I would appreciate if you would say why you think it's trash and hate it. Like, that would be helpful, right? But I'm open. Let's have these conversations. Like, it's not like everyone knows the answer to DSO. So let's get through these hard conversations, understand what direction that we need to head in together, and do that and figure this out. Like, it's fun. Like, we get to have these early conversations now. We get to be on the bleeding edge of the future of decentralized social. So let's have the conversation. Let's have these interactions. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that one of the fun parts of exploring DSO is defining these incentive mechanisms and structures to really create the best community experience. And I expect a big part of that will probably come from the community itself. So, first question from our community here today on this call: what are some features you're looking forward to implementing into Discover? Follow-up question: what are current blockers from the internet computer that you foresee being updated through NNS proposals that will help unlock some of these features? PS, love Discover, and the Starburst drop was incredible.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, there's a lot of features I'm excited about. I think you can vote for the 300 gigabyte limit. Please vote for the 300 gigabyte limit for stable storage. I think I was talking to Hazel on Monday about this, and the 300 gigabyte limit will open up an incredible amount of possibilities, right? Right now, there's a 4 gigabyte limit, and there's different ways of thinking about that. And that was a great start. It was a great way to start a conversation. And now we're thinking, okay, there's far more information and data that you could store potentially inside of the network. And as these applications grow, this is going to be a great way to rethink of how the architecture can be done. So this introduces completely new styles of architecture for Dfinity. I mean, Dfinity's 4 months, or IC, it's 4 months old, and we're already making like dramatic improvements to the system that allows us to solve problems in completely different ways. And I'm not sure if we actually understood at the beginning how we would solve these problems in different ways, but this 300 gigabyte limit will could drastically change and improve performance of Discover and future applications. And there's a lot of subjects on horizontal scalability, like how would you horizontally scale your canisters? You know, well, is it a multi-canister approach? Is it a mesh network? Like, how do you think about it? I think this 300 gigabyte is a giant puzzle piece that people may have not been considering when they were thinking of their architecture. And I think this will drastically improve that. There's I don't know if it's necessarily a proposal. I think it is. I think I saw it on the roadmap on the Dfinity forums, but it's cross canister queries, right? And how that may be achieved. And there's a lot of security implications that I don't want to really dive into that, but the ability to query canisters, inter-network and cross subnet and cross network will present within 200 to 400 milliseconds. So very quick query times between canisters will create very interesting situations. So here's a scenario. You know, I want, you can now have NFT profile photos on Discover, and it has to be an IC NFT, and we do some form of validation. But I think it actually should be, there should be proof that's your NFT. There should be proof that your profile photo is an NFT that you own. Right. And there's actually front-end tricks that we could implement. And I was talking to Steven this morning about, oh, this is how we could do that. Right. But at the end of the day, the coolest way to do it would be, canister to canister communication. So by the time the query returns from the IC, there's proof that that person's profile photo is owned by that person. Right. And there's so many mechanics that can be introduced with that. But at the end of the day, that's your profile photo that you have ownership of it, right? And it's proof that it's an NFT that you own, right? And there's so many mechanics that can be introduced with just the tradability and commerce of that. But I think those two, you know, the increasing the gigabyte or the size of stable storage and cross canister queries in the 100 to 400 millisecond range will introduce new styles of improved architecture and integrated experiences that I think people will be extremely passionate about. And there's so many aspects of both of those that they just introduce new puzzle pieces to an already growing puzzle.
Cool, thanks, Rick. So next question is an interesting one. What is the monetization model for Discover? Are you doing what Brave is doing, where users control their privacy and can decide whether or not they want to see ads or brands and get a portion of whatever the centralized platform would be getting?
Really good question. Ads is another daily conversation. It's like, how are you going to monetize this platform, right? Yes. So the short answer is yes. If I don't want to see ads will be ever implemented on Discover, but there's going to be a way that users want to promote concepts, right? Like let's say in the future, you know, Discover is a large application and I'm an IC developer and I want to promote my application. I think promotional posts on Discover would be amazing. It would be a great way to get the community feedback on an application that you've developed. But that I absolutely agree, that should be a way that you could toggle that on or off. Like, do I want to be exposed to these ads or these promotions? But if there's an ad in my portal, and this is a portal I created, I should be getting some form of monetization for this ad that exists, or this promotion or this mechanism that exists in my portal. Because portals is a job, and I think we've been saying this for a while. Being a moderator is a job. Like, it's literally a ton of work, right? You're going to spend a couple hours a day going to a single website to make sure that the feed is properly curated and users are behaving in a way that is you know, a relative to the portal's rules. So these moderators need to be actually getting paid for this. So we've got to figure out how do we funnel this revenue to the people who are actually have created the platform and have curated the platform.
Yeah, completely. I've done some community moderation work myself on like different Discords, and let me tell you, it is definitely work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So next question, do you see a non-custodial decentralized identity management platform as being a good solution for decentralized users to manage their identity access? Or do you think this is a per platform solution that must be implemented? I see a single identity management platform to be the better option.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree. Completely agree. I think there needs to be Kyle Peacock, I think he's starting the conversation. And I think like at the end of the day, like we don't want to give our identity to anyone, right? We don't want to go to Facebook and sign up, upload all of our images and create all of our interactions. We literally want to like I want a wallet or I want a device that my entire identity exists in. And then I can be like, hey, Discover, here's a piece of my identity. Hey, District, here's a piece of my identity. Here, Nuance, here's a piece of my identity. And aspects of that, your identity should be shared with it. I think there's another complex layer to that is that when I was saying earlier, is we are really more than one person. We've evolved, like as the internet has evolved us to have multiple personalities and personhoods, right? So my hope is whatever created can not only protect my root identity, but also allow me to establish other identities that I have control over. And at the end of the day, if I disagree with what a direction a platform is going in, I should be able to pull that identity out and walk away without like them owning all of the content that I've created. Not necessarily the content that the other users created, but the content that I've created. I should be able to extract my identity and plug it into another platform that better facilitates my needs.
Cool. Thanks, Rick. So I know we're coming up on time, so we'll do two more questions. We have some very interesting ones here from the community. So first, is the end goal of Discover to be a niche social media platform for hardcore users who care about decentralization, or is there a vision to take it mainstream?
Yes, good question. So if you read what is Discover on the site, Discover is a platform that exists on something we call Social Fabric. Social Fabric is a protocol that is powering Discover, and you can really look at Discover as the first user of Social Fabric. Our goal is to take Social Fabric, the same protocol that's powering Discover, and open it up to allow anyone else to build any type of Discover style they want. And, obviously these are open sourced in the future, right? So you should be able to create your own version of Medium. You should be able to create your own version of Facebook. But so taking Social Fabric out of the equation, and which anything could be built on Social Fabric that is mainstream or niche, I think Discover's future is yet to be determined, right? We do want to take it mainstream. We want to take it crypto mainstream more than anything. We think mainstream is cool. Building the future of the front page, internet of the front page, that would be awesome. But I'd rather build the front page of crypto more than the front page of the centralized world. And I think there's going to be paradigms that we're going to have to introduce that are going to require a completely different way of thinking. And it's going to take crypto wokeness, I guess, to be able to accept. And so I really hope we create a platform that just requires that style of thinking.
Cool. And a very short and sweet one as the last question. Is it currently possible to host large and high def multimedia content through Discover? Like if I wanted to upload like an episode of something like a TV show?
So going back to what NNS proposals do I want? The 300 gigabyte one? Yeah, sure. Let's get that proposal, and then let's get to high def. Yeah, let's get there.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you everyone from the community for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Rick and myself as much as I did. Big shout out to Rick for everything that you're building with Discover. Amazing job. I personally use Discover, and I hope to see it supplant other social media platforms such as Reddit. And see you guys all next time at our next community conversation. Thanks all. Bye.